Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football.
Hey, Rush Nation, it's Murf here. Good to see you all. Happy Tuesday. With me starting the show, that means there's no Stocks. So apologies for that. But Stocks, unfortunately, has a family emergency that he's having to deal with. Hopefully everything is okay with him. Initial word is it's not too bad. But rather than listen to me again for an hour, which is just too long for anybody to listen to me on my own, as usual, bringing a guest. I've got a very good friend of mine who has bailed me out last minute because it was literally, I think, like an hour and 45 minutes notice. So he's been on before. He might seem to be a controversial figure on Twitter and in the fantasy community, but I happen to love him to bits, and he's one of the most loyal and honest people that I know, and generally someone I call a friend in this industry. So welcome back to 5-Yard Rush, Andy Singleton, co-owner of Expand the Box Score. How you doing, fella?
I am well, sir. It's a pleasure to be joining you. I hope I can, fill in the shoes admirably. I have Shaun of the Dead, so a little Simon Pegg on in the background in the telly, trying to get me on your time zone and up to speed. So I'm ready to go.
I love that. That's the best prep I've ever had for anyone to come on this show. Yeah, I've got Shaun of the Dead in the background. Yeah, that pretty much is my sense of humor down to a T. So it's gonna be good. So yeah, I mean, I guess to start the show, we're gonna change it a little bit from what we normally do. We'd normally run through some news. I'll post that on Twitter if you haven't already followed, but we're 24-hour news. There's no need to really go into too many discussion points. So let's start off by finding out a little bit about Andy. I mean, for those of you that have tuned in who haven't heard Andy before on the show, first of all, go back and listen because the content he gives you and some tips and tricks is phenomenal. But tell us what's been going on. One, with Expand the Box Score, but then just in general with you. I know you've had a busy year, and for those of you that haven't heard of Andy before, you're also part of New York's finest as well. So tell us a little bit about how it's been going there during this crazy 2020.
Yeah, well, bravest. Finest is PD, which is fine. But FDNY is bravest.
Apologies.
Oh, no, all good. And yeah, I am a 19-year active and still going firefighter in Brooklyn, New York. And we were hit hard initially with this whole COVID pandemic. And it's definitely changed the landscape for how I feel about sports. I got very back involved in the NBA. If you know me somewhat well at all, you'll know I played college basketball, and growing up in Brooklyn, like, basketball was my sport. But I really kind of got out of the NBA over the last, several years, especially as I got more and more involved with the NFL and doing this fantasy stuff. But once we came back out, and that was like the first live sports, that just it consumed everything I was doing. I love the way they had the bubble set up, so that helped get back into it. And then I was like all set, like, all right, we got college football back, we got the NFL coming back, and then there was no preseason, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, there's actually football happening. It was already like week 3, and then now here we are gearing up for week 11, and I still kind of feel like I'm waiting for the other foot to catch up to the first one. So it's just been hard for me personally to get back into it. I kind of dip my toe in and out of the Twitter water this season, just because I see so many people are just so adamant and passionate still, which I love, but I just haven't been able to get that. I'll go in spurts, but consistently Monday to Friday, it's been hard. Or Monday to Sunday, I should say, it's been hard. But as you say, you guys are on lockdown, gearing up for another wave here in New York City. It's just been a trying year, but also it's been the longest year that I can recall ever in my life. I wanted to ask you, though, the last time I chatted with you, we were talking about the Yankees playing the Red Sox in London, and you were telling me about the turf and everything like that. This is the first year in several now you guys haven't had NFL games. So
yeah,
have you felt the impact?
Massively. So it's been strange here because in March everything stopped. It wasn't just like because that's still the end of it's near the end of the last 2 months of our soccer season. That completely stopped. Rugby stopped. Start of the cricket season didn't happen. So it was very strange to have no sport at all. Like it got to the point that when Germany brought their league back in May, we were all glued. Like it was like, oh my god, there's sport on TV. And I was similar to
Right.
you. I checked out of, but slightly different. I still watch the NBA. I kind of watch it with a distance. I don't get too involved with it, but I've always got a thing for the Magic. I've seen them a bunch of times, and I kind of follow them from afar. Not a dedicated fan. Don't watch every game, but I tuned into some of that. But ice hockey got me. Again, similar reason. The way that they did the
Yeah.
bubble, and I love the Lightning. Had the opportunity to see them win the Stanley Cup in '04, before the holdout in '05. So and I really got back into the hockey, staying up late and watching them win the Stanley Cup. Not just because it was the Lightning, but just again, it was sport. It was
Right.
the way they did it. No positive tests at all coming out of it. It was just great to see that sort of setup. And it's been tough. And then we had the end of the season, soccer season resume, and we kind of had nothing, and then we had everything. And it's
Right.
similar to you. We
Same.
kind of missed it. Like we had the end of the soccer season. My team played in the cup final on August 1st, and then they kicked off the season. First team to kick off the season, September 12th. We used to like quite a long preseason. We were supposed to host a major European soccer tournament here, which we're doing next year. Um,
Right.
so everything kind of is up in the air. And then with NFL fans, massively disappointing. And we were supposed to have the White Sox and I think it might have been the Cardinals here this year in baseball,
Okay.
because to build on from that Boston and New York Yankees success from the year before, they brought him over. They were going to bring him over for a 2-game series, and they want to try and do with MLB what they've done with American football. And it's
Right.
not, obviously this is going to massively halt that. And then obviously not having the games here, we were just starting to find out about who the teams were going to be. Everyone's excited, and 4 games. I've heard some talk, and I don't want to confirm this to be true, but there is a lot of talk that we might not get games in 2021 either.
For the NFL. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sit here and like confirm that I know and I'm in the
Right.
know and anything like that, but I've had a couple of conversations with people, and it's something that's being discussed and potentially decided, because they need to start planning that before the Super Bowl. So before the Super Bowl, they need to kind of know who the teams are going to be over here and then factor that into the scheduling. By the Super Bowl, we're not going to be ready. Like we're just not. You can't say, even with vaccines and everything, that that's going to happen. So
Well,
I hope
and talking about trying to get back into things, and real quick, I definitely got into the NHL as well. But before all of that, I failed to mention the basketball league was really what got things going. That to me was amazing, because I just love that league to begin with, because it's like a flashback of March Madness and all these NCAA tournaments of years past. So I love watching that anyway. But that was the first real organized sports we had back, before the NHL and the NBA and MLB came back. But this is usually around the time of year I get everything going for the Senior Bowl, and this year, we have a scouting department with Expand the Box Score, so putting things together for this whole draft guide and coordinating with our scouting team going down there and everything like that. And I'm happy to see that it's still going on and it's happening. Who knows where we'll be in January? If
mm,
we're just starting November now, things are changing. But somebody asked me the other day. They said, "Are you worried that the game might ultimately get canceled with all these players opting out now?" And my honest response was, "I really have not been paying attention at all. Like,
mm.
I don't know what you're talking about." So it's really hard to stay as involved as typically a guy like myself is. So like I said, I'm hoping to just give your audience some entertainment while we fly through this show rundown.
Well, not just on top of that. I think, another reason is you are very highly successful. You have been in the top 20 of the fantasy pro rankings for a number of years. You've played in a lot of high stakes leagues. You've won money. Played in big tournaments. Yeah, okay. As you said, you're probably not as where you would normally be, but one, I still reckon you're probably at a pretty good level, and two, do you still have those tips, tricks, and strategy points that I think our listeners will benefit from, especially as we're talking about week 11? Some people's leagues end week 12, some week 13, some even week 14 for the regular season. So, based on your experience in the history of this, you're thinking you're week 11, you've got, 5, 6 wins under your belt. So you're in contention. You're not quite there. You haven't cemented your place. You either need to win out or you need to win 2 or 3 to get in. What would you be advising the listeners of this show what they need to do from a strategy point of view, to help them get in to
Well,
get that? And obviously it's tough because you don't know their rosters, but some things that you would be doing if you've got a 5-5, 6-4 roster, you'd be looking to do to try and get in.
I mean, outside of going to church and saying a couple prayers, trying to get my week 11 opponent's home address and see if I can hack his computer to change his lineup. No, I'm obviously kidding. League to league depends. I mean, it depends on what type of league. Keepers, dynasty, redraft, everything varies. Trade deadlines, if those have passed, if they're still going, like what's available. But really try to target some of the. I mean, and I don't at this stage of the game. I think there's so much information out there and knowledge, and it's just restating the obvious with some things. But target the teams that are easily out of playoff contention at this point. It's not necessarily collusion, but again, depending on your league type, make a deal that, listen, even if you think it's not on paper a win or an even, if you think, check out the matchups remaining, see, really get ahead of your remaining schedule and see what the matchups remaining on, who benefits from those, and try to take advantage of that. It might seem like player value, name for name, and I'm just throwing things out here right now, but if you got like DeAndre Hopkins versus Stephon Diggs, for instance, and again, I'm just throwing this out there because I haven't even looked at the matchups yet, but Diggs might have a better matchup on paper the next 3 weeks, whereas Hopkins doesn't, and you have Hopkins. Offer him for Diggs, and it seems like an even trade, but it's strategically helping you benefit more for your vantage point for the remainder of the season. But I listen. I really think fantasy football comes down to so much luck. We've talked about this with baseball before, where a player his team can be down 10 runs in the bottom of the ninth, and he's 0 for 3 that day, but his fourth at bat, it's a meaningless home run, and it still saves your fantasy team. You got a football team that's trailing by 20 points in the third going into the fourth quarter, and your running back might not get another carry for the rest of the game. Like, you just can't dictate that. We were talking before we went on about the Jaguars and the Packers, and a stat that came out before the game was the Packers are averaging like the most points per offense, like 25 points per game, and the Jaguars were allowing 25 points per game, and I think the over/under on team points was 30 for the Packers. And you just looked like it was a slaughter on paper, and then sure enough, it was a dogfight and a very low-scoring affair by what it should have been. So you just, it's so unpredictable. One thing I will say that's really kind of intrigued me about this season, this is the first one in a long time that I can vividly say the quarterback position has become important again. There seems to be a lot of deviance and separation in terms of tiers of quarterbacks, where it used to be like, 1 through 3, there was, that tier, and then 4 through 20, there wasn't much of a separator. There's a huge difference now between like QB 16 and QB 8, for instance. So this is the first time in a long time I can say the quarterback position has become very valuable and important.
It is, and what's interesting is that if you punted at the top end of the order, if you got Mahomes, you're not going to get your value on where you drafted him, but he's been relatively safe. Same with Kyler Murray. I mean, he's the QB1 right now. If you were patient and waited on someone like Josh Allen, you've done well because you'd have got maximum value at the top and near the bottom. But if you paid up for someone like Lamar Jackson right now, you're sick. I'd love to see someone in a 1 QB league take Lamar Jackson in the second round, show me their roster, and tell me that they're still going to make the playoffs. because I reckon the only way they've done that is if they ran the table on the waiver wire, picked up Robinson, picked up Mike Davis, picked up all these guys that have been big players off the fantasy waiver wire early in the season that are still contributing points, because there's no way you drafted Lamar in the second round and he's sitting at QB9. I mean, he was QB13 last week. He's had a minor increase, but that gap there is tiny. I think it's like 4 points between those four players. I just think it's important, but at the same point, we as fantasy analysts don't know anything about who's going to be QB1 every year, because the guy who was QB1 by, I think, how many points was he ahead, Lamar, last year? 70, 80 points?
It
was a lot.
Yeah, it might have even been 100. It was.
Because,
it was.
I mean, he was
a significant
obscenely
gap.
He's 80 points behind Kyler Murray right now.
But and that's just it. I mean, even with that, you see Kyler Murray 600 yards rushing so far. Even guys like Daniel Jones are leading the Giants in rushing, and not by fluke. Like, this a legitimate runner. You look at Josh Allen in kind of the same way. Cam Newton with, what is it, like 8 rushing touchdowns or something.
Yeah.
The kind of the way the position is changing a little as well. So it's been very interesting, because like I played Mahomes in 3 separate leagues the week he went off against my Jets, and not only did my Jets get embarrassed and crushed, but I faced Mahomes in 3 leagues, and that was the difference maker. I was even across the board, if not winning, except for Mahomes, who just basically doubled any quarterback I had with his performance that week. So, week to week, it's tough to tell who's going to be the stud, but a season-long accumulation of points, there was not really much of a separator. Now there seems to be more of gaps forming.
There definitely is. I think the position's becoming more important, and especially 2 QB leagues have grown drastically in the last 3 years, that it's now a position of relevance again. And I don't think we're back to the stage where you should be drafting them in the 2nd and 3rd round, but I definitely think, if you were hunting in that sort of 5th round to 8th round range and took a Kyler or Josh Allen, even a Russell Wilson, they were all in that 5 to 7, 5 to 8 range at the start of the season. Those are the guys that have hit. Kyler Murray, number 1, he's 23 points clear. Russell Wilson, he's 4th. Aaron Rodgers, I think, would have been start of the 9th. He's done well. Deshaun Watson's 7th, and he's pretty safe. Like, all those sort of guys are in that group. I mean, if you look at the top 12, it's as you say, once you get past Justin Herbert in 8th, and Justin Herbert hasn't even played a full season. The guy didn't start the first couple of games. I mean, he probably would be on pace to be up there with the other guys, probably a bit short, but he'd probably be up there for near Russell Wilson pace, I would say. He's in terms of the games that he's played. But I think from there is a separator. But I think we as fantasy analysts, we see something one year like Lamar Jackson and think, well, he's likely to repeat or be top 2 again, and he's sitting in 9th because he's not rushing as much. I mean, he's still got 524 yards. It's not bad, but you don't see him breaking that 1,000-yard barrier again. And, completion percentage is down. TDs are down at a huge rate to where it was last season, which everyone kind of predicted, but they thought with the floor would be the rushing. And I think it's relevant. And, the one position that gets me every time is wide receiver, because, everyone says, oh, you've got to go out and get one of the top wide receivers. And once again, this year's proved that it doesn't matter if you get the first wide receiver off the board or the 20th wide receiver off the board. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. There isn't really. The only one I would say is Devontae Adams, and the only reason he's not number 1 overall is he's not been fit and he's not played. But on a points per game average, he's the only one that has provided any separation from everybody else. Because you're saying, Tyreek Hill, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, those are all guys.
And if you look at the top 10 wide receivers, Hopkins wasn't even going as the first rounder in a lot of spots this year. So none of them in the top 10.
No, only Adams was a first rounder, and he's third, but he's missed games, and he might be the one. But you can say Thomas, okay, give him a mulligan. He was injured, fine. You can say that, but Julio Jones, he's nowhere near it. And even the second round running back, wide receivers haven't really. I mean, you getting DeAndre Hopkins in the third round in some
Right,
cases. You were
right.
getting DK Metcalf in the fifth round. You were getting Stephon Diggs sixth round maybe. People just didn't like the fact he was with Josh Allen. Adam Thielen third round. Calvin Ridley fifth round. And he's had some injuries. He would otherwise I think he'd be up there. Chase Claypool was practically free, and he's a top 10. All these guys are just. It's just at this point now where people invested too much in wide receivers, and people are saying, well, okay, I took a running back in the first round and I busted. And I'm like, yeah, injuries happen. I get that.
Right.
But if you took Kamara or Cook, or, you're probably doing quite well in your league. It's a bit of a hit and miss, but if you hit the guy in the first round, you're going to be away. And, what everyone had last season with CMC being 3-4. If you took Kamara 3-4, you're probably pretty set right now. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things you can do for your fantasy leagues for a perspective of trying to get in. I like blocking players at this stage, so I like looking at what other teams have, and if they have a quarterback need on buy, I'm going out and I'm picking up quarterbacks if I've got space, and I always tend to have a couple of spaces on my roster just to do this sort of thing. If they're struggling at DST, I'm blocking at DST. If they need a wide receiver, I'm blocking a wide receiver. I'm hoarding players week to week and just streaming that position. That tends to work and play the matchup. And the other is to look at your matchups, like as you said, 3 weeks in advance. Look at who's got the better schedule. And look at 3-week streaming options. So right now, for me, the Browns are a lock at a streaming defense for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So then you don't have to worry about that position. You can use your waiver priorities to get other positions. I think they're the big things is to block people, get handcuffs now. This is the time to go and buy your handcuffs. There's still too many leagues where Mattison, Pollard are completely free out there. I would have said Bernard, but he's been picked up, I think, in most places now, given Mixon's injury. But if there's a top priority handcuff out there, you need to be going and owning them, because this is the time where a Dalvin Cook will get injured, a Zeke will get injured, because this is what happens. This is the grueling part. We saw it in games this weekend. Teams getting tired. They're playing for everything. Trying to fight that extra yard, and this is where those injuries happen. And we've seemed to have trended a little bit where injuries have been not as bad as they were at the start of the season, but it's this period now where people start to get hurt. We see it every year. You get your CJ Andersons that come through and win a league for you.
Right.
So make sure you're the one that's in the position to get the next CJ Anderson, the next Derrick Henry before he was a real big thing, and make sure you've got those players on your roster. So talk about, I mean, you talked about expanding the box score a little bit before we get into some week 11 stuff quickly. Talk to us about what you're doing with expand the box score. I'm a customer. I love the service. I use it all the time to get data, and it's brilliant for college and for football. I think you do baseball as well, don't you?
No, we did. We were getting into it. We were getting it to cover all sports. So basically, how this started was, as I mentioned, the Senior Bowl before. I've been covering the draft, the NFL draft for the last 6 years or so, and just doing evaluations. I was always looking for advanced stats for college players, most specifically targets for receivers, and it was just something that you could find, but not easily, not affordably. Not sourced, not all in one spot for you. So I got together with a friend from the industry, from within the industry, who was good at doing all these, data spreadsheets and uses Tableau, and was making leaderboards for Justin Mason's Great Fantasy Baseball Invitational, and he was doing leaderboards for myself for Draft with Giants fantasy football league I run, and I basically pointed him to data I was looking at, and he captured it all. And from just looking for targets, we were able to basically give every touch of every player for every game. So we could tell you, uh, where on the field these touches were coming from. So, was it between the 20s? Was it, the red zone? What time of game was it? Everything like that. The one thing we lack is we don't have live eyes watching the game, so we can't tell you like, what formation the team was in. We can't tell you how many broken tackles, A dot, things like that. But we can give you every other metric based on the X's and O's and just the raw data of what happened in that touch. It's sortable for, we have leaderboards that you can customize any search you want. You can search by class, you can search by conference, you could search by position, you could search by height if you want. If you only wanted to see receivers 5'10" and under, for instance, you could search that way. So it's really a lot that we offer, and um, we're still evolving, so we're still adding more to it. As I mentioned, we added a scouting department this year, so we have over a dozen aspiring NFL scouts that have been putting out daily scouting reports for NFL draft eligible players. We have over 200 reports up already on the site. We're doing a draft guide that's going to come out a week after the combine. It's going to feature over 350 players, full NFL grade scouting reports. These are guys that are trying to get picked up by teams. So this is not a gimmick. This is not a goof. This is, legit work going into this. We have our content team that's pumping out fantasy related articles. The tools we have can be used for gambling as well to see like team trends and basically a lot of value in what we are providing. And like I said, still evolving. So the price is $20 per sport for a full year, or $35 for both college football and the NFL. We were going to get into other sports like baseball and basketball, and then realize, what, let's just, instead of doing multiple things at half capacity, let's master one thing first. Let's walk before we try to run, and we just concentrated on football solely, which is really what it was born from anyway. So that's all we're featuring right now is just the NFL and college football. And our college football stats is really, really where you're getting your full value because, like I said, it's just stuff there at an affordable rate that you're seeing the game from a different aspect, from a different angle. The craziest part is we can't play college DFS in New York State, so to me, I've kind of like not been as involved in that, but I've had so many guys privately message or email the site saying how useful it's been for them in playing college DFS, and they try to keep it. I'm asking for testimonials, like spread the word, and they're like, no, I'm trying to keep this a secret because it's that valuable of a tool. So, actual growth of the site has been a little harder because of that. But it's also kind of a blessing at the same time to have a product that people actually are saying is doing what it's intended to do. So
like I said, I'm a customer. I recommended a number of people to buy it here in the UK. It was another podcast, Full 10 Yards. Tim Monk is the host. We're good friends. There's no competition as such. We're good friends. We help each other and support each other. And you said I need a database resource. I said expand the box score is the best. It's not even it's like £20. It's like 25-30 pounds for both, and it's marvelous. And he said I use it every week. I use it to pull a lot of the stats that I use for the shows and the articles I write, and I have other resources as well, but that's the one I always have bookmarked and open and cross reference. So and I mean that, I can sing it on record, so you can cut this out and use that as a video testimony. I'll give you one if you need one. I'll do a video testimonial. No, you hit me up. I'm here. So I love the tool, and like I said, it's great. It's easy to use and filterable, which is the best bit. Is I like the fact that you can filter it, because some of them are a bit cumbersome when you have to click it and it doesn't really load that well. So I definitely recommend anybody listening to this, especially if you are. We got an aspiring group of people here that are into the NFL draft and want to get that edge, not just from a scouting and from a draft perspective, but also from a fantasy football perspective. If you want to get that edge on the rookies, and use that data. That's where it's really invaluable for your rookie drafts in April. This is the time to be investing in a tool like that. Because this is when the season's winding down. The big players show up about now. Yes, okay, a few have opted out, which is a shame, but you'll still have historical data on there and can still look at it. But don't be the person looking at a draft in at the end of April saying, oh right, Kyle Pitts is a tight end out of Florida. He's gone in the first round. He must be quite good. Well, I should target him. Well, why do you want to target him? What is it about Kyle Pitts? Is he going to actually fit well into the roster that he's going on to? What's going to make him stand out? Is he going to build that connection? Because you can have first round talent busts. Happens every year. I happen to bet right now, if anyone asks me, that Kyle Trask is going to be a massive first round bust this year. And listen, I'm a Florida guy. I love Florida. But I just do not think Kyle Trask is going to be a success in the NFL.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. He's surprised everywhere he's been, though. I could see that. There's likable traits, and then there's also
I love
things
him.
that don't jump off the page either.
I just think he's too slow to pick everything up. I think it's taken him too long to get to the level of where he is now. And you're not going to get that. We'll look at Dwayne Haskins. You're not going to have 30 games in the NFL to figure it out. You got to figure it out in 10.
Right.
And that's your window. And if you're not going to figure it out in 10, look at Josh Rosen.
Right.
They'll cut you. They'll go find someone else, because that is the measure of success now. And I just don't think, I think if you gave Kyle Trask 30 games, I think he'd do it. I think he'd figure it out, and I think he'd be a good player. I don't think he'd be a top 10 quarterback, but I think he'd be starter level inside if he got 30 games. But I just don't think he is. And that's nothing against him. He's a great player. He's having a terrific season. People talking Heisman. He's not going to win it, but man, if he made the shortlist, that's a heck of a thing for him to even be in that conversation, because none of us who support Florida thought that was going to happen. So, and that's why the tool's great, because you can start to look at the measures, you can look at what they're doing, and what he's doing is unbelievable. But you can compare it to what he's been doing in previous years and think what has elevated the play. And you're not going to get the answer necessarily, but you can look at the trends and see why I've got doubts and why I don't think he's going to do it. But
got it.
Definitely subscribe.
Thank
all
you.
Right. Let's look at just very quickly some takeaways from this week. And I sort of jotted a couple down. I'm just going to go through these really quickly because I want to go into the awards section that we're going to do. So these are what I jotted down for week 11, just some takeaways, or week 10 for you to consider going forward. Josh Kelly, pretty much, I wouldn't say he's droppable, but I'm not starting him in any leagues now. He is well and truly, that job is, the fact that he's losing your job to Kalen Ballage, that says to me that's not a player I really want to be investing in too much going forward. Maybe, if I'm in a dynasty league, I'm just, stashing him on a taxi squad or just burying him on my roster somewhere. But I won't be starting Joshua Kelly at any point now until the end of the season. It's just not enough for him to be developing into a role there. But maybe next season, when it clears out a little bit, we can see. Salman Ahmed, he seems to be the handcuff. He sort of got that role, 23 touches on Sunday. So Jordan Howard's just been cut. Matt Breida is always questionable and unfit. So Salman Ahmed, as I said on Monday's show, is the guy you want to be owning. And I think he's available in 99.6% of leagues. So go out there and pick him up. And he's worth a few fat bucks this week. Don't trust any of the wide receivers for the 49ers going forward. Marlon is just a bit of a crapshoot. He doesn't really have a plan when he's going in there and deciding who he's passing to. There's not a lot of pre-designed plays going into there either. Jordan Reed came out with the most targets, and appreciates a tough game against the Saints, but there isn't any consistency with these guys. So one week it could be Richie James, the next it could be Deebo Samuel if he's fit. The next it might be Brandon Ayuk, but only one of those guys every week is going to be fantasy relevant. So, I would narrow them all down and rank them all down a little bit on your rankings. And if you're in a start-sit decision, and I had the choice between one of a 49er wide receiver or say Jarvis Landry's probably winning that for me, even though I don't rate Baker Mayfield as a fantasy quarterback that I want to be attached to too many weapons, but I think you know what you're getting, whereas you don't know you're getting that with the 49ers. Josh Reynolds is probably the best kept secret in fantasy football right now. 3 of the last 4 games, he's had 12 plus PPR points. He is someone whose role is just continuing to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Van Jefferson was the guy on Hard Knocks everyone was talking about. Most people listening to this probably don't even know who Josh Reynolds is. He's a wide receiver for the 49 for the LA Rams. So definitely be picking him up. He's available in 98% of leagues. And then the last is J.D. McKissick is going to be a top 15 running back for the remainder of the season in PPR formats, and you can book that now. When you look at the charts there for Alex Smith, he had 55 passes on Sunday, 41 of them went for 9 yards or less. And it's just, if you got Logan Thomas and if you got J.D. McKissick, those guys are going to eat in this offense, especially if Alex Smith isn't throwing the ball further than 9 yards, and he threw 9 behind the line of scrimmage. So it's great news if you own J.D. McKissick, because he's going to be a top 15 back in PPR going forward. Thoughts on any of that, Andy?
I think I'm most intrigued by the Salvin Ahmed thing. I was a big Myles Gaskin fan, and I could not believe that he didn't get a single opportunity last year. But in hindsight, I'm kind of glad he didn't, because it was just that much more of a surprise this year. Like when he started to get carries, there were so many people that didn't realize how good Myles Gaskin is and can be. I'm more surprised by Salvin Ahmed just being as good. And you mentioned the handcuff. I don't even know if it's a guarantee that Gaskins walks back in as the clear guy. Is it going to be like a 60-40 split? I think it's a surprise that they let Howard go. I think it's a bigger surprise that Breida wasn't, was handed an opportunity to really take on and thrive in this role, and just didn't do enough to separate or distinguish himself with the coaches. So I think the Ahmed thing is really intriguing in terms of what happens when Gaskin comes back, and is this like a 60-40 split, or is he truly just a handcuff? Like, hey, if Myles goes down again, we know you can fill in, and we're going to ride him as the workhorse he's been. But I'm curious to see where that goes.
I am as well, which is why I think he's worth an ad, because if nothing else, you're going to get 2 weeks of production out of him, and he might be the guy that gets you into your playoffs. Now, I think he's maybe RB2 upside at best, but given how bad that position is at times, with all the injuries and the guys getting in, the running back by committees that are going around the league, you get 10, 15 PPR points out of Salvin Ahmed every week for at least 2 weeks, you're going to be in a good spot. He's not going to bust you, because he's got no competition now until Gaskin comes back. And that's going to be at least a couple of weeks, because they're cutting the competition. It wouldn't surprise me if Breida got cut. It wouldn't surprise me if he got cut. And, they traded for him, and they paid Jordan Howard a lot of money. So, it's testament to those guys and the culture that they're building that Gaskin and Ahmed are the guys getting the ball.
Hey, you mentioned Josh Rosen before. They took a gamble on him as well, and got bait. So, this is a franchise that is got their foot on the pedal right now. They seem to be making right choices and decisions. The biggest one was obviously getting rid of Gase, but this is going in the right direction for Miami, and they're not afraid to admit they're wrong. I think that's where a lot of teams, bury themselves, is just the pride of holding on too long to something. Like, well, we gave up X amount for said player, and we're going to give them a couple more games. Those 30 games you mentioned with Kyle Trask, their window is short. Hey, perform or not, we don't care what the name on the back is. We're worried about the name on the front of the jersey, and it's nice to see.
Absolutely. So, you're a Jets fan. I've got to ask you this question. It looking more and more likely every week that you're going to end up with the number 1 pick.
Mm-hmm.
If the Jets end up with the number 1 pick, is it going to be Trevor Lawrence? Do you think Trevor Lawrence, and do you think that the franchise give up on Darnold, or do you think that they try and trade out, or do you think they get another position? I mean, I'm keen to get your thoughts, because I see the consensus going more and more towards Lawrence, but I'm keen for your thoughts.
I mean, there's so much that can happen between now and next year. We heading into 2019, Tua was the unquestioned number one quarterback. And then Joe Burrow just put up this magical year and still looks pretty good. Prior to that, go back to 2018, Justin Herbert was the consensus going to be the number one QB in that class, and he fell to number three. And now he looks like, hey, maybe some teams missed. So much can happen, but there really hasn't been as much of a can't miss prospect as Trevor Lawrence in quite some time. I mean, the accolades to match the on-field production, the swagger, the national championships, the long hair, the look. I mean, this is just a big stud and gets it done in every level. So there's no surprises or gimmicks with this. This is like I said, probably the biggest can't miss prospect in quite some time in recent memory.
I would say since Andrew Luck.
Yes, and that's kind of been the comparison most have drawn, and yeah, absolutely. So what's not to like about that, especially for a franchise struggling? I wanted them to float Darnold, every opportunity they can. Just send every, I said after Andy Dalton went down, if I'm Joe Douglas, I'm on the phone with Jerry saying, what are you going to offer me for Darnold? How about a first? No. How about a second? No. How about a third? Give me what you can give me, and just get something out of it. I feel like that window is sailing. So I don't know what they're going to do, but I feel kind of bad because I do like Sam Darnold. I think he's run into some bad luck from the mono to last year to some of the injuries plaguing him this year. But like you said, the window and the chance to prove yourself is so limited now that he's kind of shown he can be a good backup, but is he really going to lead your franchise? So I'm happy that we're in this position to get Trevor Lawrence, and I'm used to this team. Somehow we're going to screw this up, and we're going to be in a tie for the worst record. Listen, this is just the way this team goes. That will wind up with like the number 2 overall pick.
You won't this year.
That you want number 1.
Adam Gase has perfected the art of tanking. Like he did pretty well in Miami. He's mastered it now. I don't think there's anything to worry about. You got a 2-game lead in the sweepstakes. I think you win 1, but I don't think you win more than that. But we'll see. Which segues nicely to some midterm awards. So we've done the major honors that you'd get in the NFL just based off what we've seen this year, and then we've done some fantasy ones as well for position and MVP. So we'll do the proper ones first. So we'll do the awards that if the season ended today, who would you crown, Andy, as your MVP for this year based on what we've seen the first half of the season, first half and a bit?
So just non-fantasy, I would probably
non-fantasy in real life.
Yeah, I would probably have to say Kyler Murray. The wins are starting to be there. DeAndre Hopkins is credited for the catch, and it was a terrific catch and amazing. But you don't have an opportunity for that catch without Kyler Murray being what he is, and as special as he is. And you could just see he's at a different gear. He's at a different level. People have been talking about like he's too quick for the NFL, which is the fastest speed of football in the world. So I just think he's just such a unique and special talent. I know you have Mahomes here, and I can't knock that. But I just think you'd still have, even with the lesser quarterback than Mahomes, you'd still have a playoff team with this Chiefs roster. Without Kyler Murray, I don't know what's happening with the Cardinals.
Yeah, I can totally buy into that argument. I put 3 names down here when I was drawing this up, and the first one was Kyler, the second one was Tom Brady, and the third was Mahomes. The only reason I've gone with Mahomes is because I just think the narrative is there. Big extension, really popular guy, and the thing with Kyler, the popularity is growing, but Mahomes is doing it with the personality and the swagger, whereas I think Kyler is just doing it. And I think he's got a bit of a way to go to be this personality and superstar. And I just think for the award, there's always a narrative. I talk about narrative to awards, and that's just how I see it going. And I think you painted a really good one there for Kyler Murray. Are Arizona a playoff team without Kyler? No, I definitely not. So, that's one half narrative. I would say exactly the same about Tom Brady, and that's why I put his name down. Other Buccaneers, a 7-3 team, their best record since 2002 without Tom Brady. No, they've got lots of good pieces, but it's that leadership that he brings. But I just think with Mahomes, I don't even think we've seen vintage Mahomes. I don't even think we've seen the best Mahomes there is. But he still racked up 8 wins. And I still think that they in that narrative of the big extension coming off the Super Bowl, we all know how difficult it is to win the Super Bowl and then go back to the playoffs. He's making it look easy. So that would be my kind of thinking of. And I just think people will vote for him more. I think that's ultimately it. It's a popularity contest with a narrative, and I just think people will vote Mahomes over Murray because, for me, he's the face of the NFL now for the next few years.
Yeah.
But I personally, if I was going on pure impact on their team, I would agree with you. I would say that Kyler Murray is probably the most important player to their franchise right now. Because you'll say they're 6-3. I think they flip that. I think without Murray, they're 3-6. Because the defense isn't that good. The run game's okay. It's not bad. The rest of the receiving core is fine. There's some names in there, and there's a lot of them, but there's no real stud. There's no real, except for Hopkins, there's no real guy. There's no alpha on that team. And I don't think Hopkins has swung them that far. I think Murray's contribution has swung them more.
And listen, I think there's an added element to just seeing somebody his size playing that position and doing some of the stuff he does, and it just motivates others around him to make plays and to be better. So Mahomes looks like a quarterback. Kyler Murray does not look like a quarterback.
No.
So when he's back under center, it's an added, like, you're rooting for the little guy, you're rooting for the underdog.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. All right. Offensive player of the year. So we again have gone separate. I went with Russell Wilson purely because without him, Seattle were I think Seattle were a 2-win team. I think and the reason I can't put him in the MVP conversation is because they should be winning their division, and with the lead that they had, they should be fully ahead of their division. They should have be one step into wrapping this up. They were a 1 seed earlier on in the season. Now they're the 7th seed, and they're pretty much just on the verge of even making the playoffs. But their defense is historically bad. Like, it's as bad an NFL defense, with the exception of maybe Dallas, that I've seen in probably about 3 or 4 years. It's just they're not really being coached. They've got names on there that are going out there and making plays, but they're not giving them the opportunity to make those plays. So I think Russell Wilson he's just been phenomenal all season. He's barely put a foot wrong. Okay, a couple of interceptions, but he's not really put a foot wrong for me, and that's why I'd give him Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, I can't argue that. He's a dynamic player, and he makes his receivers. He accentuates their strengths.
Yeah.
So you like to see that. He's not making DK Metcalf be something he's uncomfortable with, or Lockett. He gives them opportunity to thrive in the roles they're most comfortable with. So I like that as well. I personally went with Dalvin Cook, just because. Well, the argument against Cook here is when he's out of the game, Alexander Madison looks just like him. So, is Alexander Madison really that good, or is the system that Minnesota's built? But I think it's easy to forget when we go back a couple of years, he was coming out of Florida State, like, considered a phenomenal talent. And then it just kind of, I don't know, it feels like that feeling just kind of dissipated a little. Every week, just how good he really is. So if there were one player that I would want to build an offense around right now, I would say Cook would definitely be on the short list.
Yeah, I am probably the biggest Dalvin Cook doubter out there, and it's not to do with his talent. It's just the fact that I was never convinced he could play 16 games, and what he's done over the last season and a half, and what his body has gone through. Now, listen, he is one injury away from being out for however many months. But despite me saying this for the last 18 months, he's missed 2 games in 18 months, maybe 3 games in 18 months, and his body is holding up. Credit to the staff that are keeping him fit, but you just saw it back to back 240-yard plus scrimmage games. All right, wasn't so hot on Monday Night Football, didn't need to be, but yeah, I just think you're right. I think he's so dynamic. He's probably the best pure power runner in the NFL for what he does.
Yeah, and not only does he get yardage, but he finds the end zone,
Mm.
which doesn't seem to translate across the board. Kamara finds the end zone, but not as many yards. Of course, he adds the receiving skills, but Cook isn't a slouch there either. So I just think the total combination, the total package. He's in the class of guys like Kamara, like
Mm.
CMC, like Saquon Barkley. But again, these guys, you got to stay on the field, and he's stayed on the field enough
Absolutely.
to remain relevant.
Yeah, you miss a game here and there, that's always going to be fine. It's are you going to play enough games to make a difference? And he definitely is. Right, defensive player of the year.
You have to game plan for him. Is what
Yeah,
it comes down to.
absolutely. And speaking of game plan, we've picked 2 guys for defensive player of the year, where you massively have to game plan. You've gone with someone from the Bears.
Yeah, and not the guy you think. I mean, I guess now you would think that, but Roquan Smith has just been what they've asked him to be, what they drafted him to be. This was a high,
Mhm.
number 8 overall pick. I liked him coming out of Georgia. I like the linebacker position. I'm partial to middle linebackers, and
Mm.
he's just become that guy holding down the middle for Chicago. So if you're just going based on the stats and looking at the numbers, I mean, this is a guy you anchor and build around. Let him be the core of your defense and build around it, and he's doing it and getting it done.
Yeah, there's so many good. I think this is a really good time in the generation of football of just really good Mike linebackers. Devin White, Devin Bush. There's quite a few out there um, that I just think are exceptional. Roquan probably leads them all, so I can't argue that too much. I went with a very familiar and traditional name, not for any other reason, but I think what he continues to do week to week with all eyes and pressure on him is phenomenal. It's Aaron Donald, because he's double teamed pretty much every play. He is known across the league as the best defensive player, and normally when you get a guy like that, they can scheme these guys out. Best example of this is if you look at Shaq Barrett at the Buccaneers. Shaq Barrett at the Buccaneers, remaining sort of reigning sack leader, 19 and a half sacks last year. You put him in the team this year, he's not getting as close to the quarterback. Why? Because they've seen enough tape. They scheme him to where they can cover him. Now it does open up guys like JPP and other guys to get home, and that's where the Bucs have been highly efficient this year. So he's kind of being selfish, but or selfless in taking the teams. But Aaron Donald, when you come on the field against the Rams, you got to stop Aaron Donald, and teams can't do it. They just can't do it. He can still get home so often, and that just baffles me that we're in a league with the best coaches and the best players in the world, and you still can't stop this guy.
Right.
That's my only reason is he just continues to set the standard and set the bar every single week, and no one has really figured him out. And I don't know if everyone ever will. You think at some point someone would stop him, but yeah, I think both of them are very trusty candidates for this. Now, this is one we did agree on. Rookie of the year, we've both gone Justin Herbert. I think we've talked about him already. There's just no surprises there that he's not only been the best quarterback, but just the way that he's confounded everybody's expectations, and he's just taken to the NFL. I remember his first start, he had no notice. He came in 15 minutes before they were due to go out there, and he's just like, bring it on, fine, I'll do this. And it saddens me that he plays in an environment every single week where he is outstanding and yet the team lose.
Yeah. But they've had some tough breaks though. He could easily have 2 more victories on his ledger right now.
He could have a lot more than that. There's a stat that somebody shared with me earlier in the week. I think it might have been yesterday. I'm just pulling it up, and this is just absolutely nuts. That there's only 3 teams in the NFL this season that have not lost by more than 1 score. One's the Steelers, obviously they're 9-0. One's the 8-1 Chiefs, and the other is the 2-7 Chargers.
Well, I mean, think of it in these terms as well, though. What franchise should be more excited about their potential when you consider Eckler's been out, and that was supposed to be your lead running back. Derwin James is a stud safety, and he can't stay on the field. You got Bosa, who's always battling stuff. Their linebacker core hasn't gelled the way it can and should. When you think like this team in the span of snapping your fingers could turn around and be leading or challenging the Chiefs for divisional supremacy, and it would not surprise at all. They have the building blocks you want. So to know that we have our franchise quarterback, like this is insane. He's every bit the part, and I remember when people were down on him in the offseason, before the draft, and starting to favor Burrow and Tua, and just kind of look down on Herbert, saying this is a Sunday player. He showed up at Senior Bowl and just looked head and shoulders above the competition there at his position. Just look, no, I'm a pro. You guys are trying to prove that you have a shot at being a pro. I'm already a pro. Like this is this is easy. It just looks different. So to know you have that. I mean, this guy's on pace for what, 38 touchdowns and 12 interceptions.
Yeah, phenomenal as a rookie to be putting up those numbers, and yeah, he's just been class. I went with him as offensive rookie of the year. You've gone with undrafted running back James Robinson, and very easy to see why. I think he has been exceptional this year, and yeah, I could easily get on board with that because this was a guy that nobody expected to get the job. He's come in, he's owned it. He's the running back 4 in fantasy, but just every week he's been the shining light on what's been a pretty dismal season for the Jags.
Well, we were supposed to have Bob Lung with us, who's Mr. Consistency, and that's what James Robinson's been. I think it was kind of a blessing. I had a tough time turning the corner and getting into the season, but James Robinson really either suffered from not having a preseason in the NFL or really benefited from not having the preseason, depending on what side of the fence you're on, because this guy would have been a household name in most drafts had there been a preseason. He was a surprise to the majority, but not those that were paying attention to him. So it was like free money for a lot of people. And if there was an NFL preseason this year, this guy would not have been a surprise to anybody. He would have been a top pick. That's why I say like the lack of a preseason kind of hurt his household name recognition, but he's starting to carve it out.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think that's more than fair. I'm a big fan of his and think he has done an exceptional job. And we'll talk about him a little bit later on in some of the fantasy awards. I'm just going to blitz through the next couple of awards, with conscious of time. So defensive rookie of the year, I went Patrick Queen. You've gone Jeremy Chin, and again, I think both picks absolutely make sense. I'm more shocked than either of us went with. His name's just totally escaped me. Chase Young, who I think probably will win it, but I just have a problem giving it to him, given just how bad Washington have been this year. But I can see that. But I think you can make an argument for all those guys.
I love Patrick Queen, by the way, and he was my first choice, but I saw you went with him, so
yeah, fair.
I just want to shake it up a little.
Yeah, no, and I think Jeremy Chin's been fantastic. He's been the player that the Panthers have been missing for quite some time. Coach of the year, I went very obvious and went Mike Tomlin because they're unbeaten, but I actually respect your choice a lot more of Brian Flores because I think if you had said to me that at week 10 Miami would be 6-3, I'd have just shaken my head and gone, what are you smoking?
I actually felt like this was a possibility for them. I didn't think they'd get to it the way they've gotten to it. When we talked about their running back situation before, when we talk about the fact that their receivers have been a little banged up, you switch quarterbacks. Just the way they've gotten to where they've gotten has surprised me more than the actual record. I wouldn't have been surprised at the 6-3 because they were extremely competitive last year, and it just seemed like they knew like we're gonna give you 80% of what we got, and we know internally we can kick it up a notch when we're ready to go, and that's when we're going to unveil it next year. That's just how it felt. It didn't seem like they were playing over their heads. It felt like last year they were kind of taking their foot off the gas a little, but not for lack of effort. More like we don't want to play our hand yet. I love the direction Flores has them going. The Belichick disciple. He's a Brooklyn guy from near me, so I'm partial to him for that alone. It's hard being supportive of anybody other than the Jets in this division. But if it's one guy, I would have to, pay favor to. It's Flores.
I couldn't agree more. I think he's done a phenomenal job, and he's been an absolute credit to that organization, and they're no longer a joke and a laughing stock. They've really come together, and I think they are. If they don't make the playoffs this year, I'd put money on them to be in the playoffs next year for sure. Comeback player of the year, I went with Ben Roethlisberger. You've gone with Damian Harris. I think, to be honest, the real person will be Alex Smith. I think he's the one that will win it, given what he's come back from. I think both these players have contributed in so many ways. Ben Roethlisberger's leading a 9-0 team, and Damian Harris has provided a run game to a team that didn't have any. So, and he definitely looks so much better than Sony Michel. So I hope that Damian Harris is going to continue that workload. Right, let's get on to some fantasy stuff. We've talked about some of these players already. So fantasy MVP, I've gone with Dalvin Cook, and you've gone with Alvin Kamara.
Which is odd because I went with Dalvin Cook as the real life MVP. So it could go either way here.
Yeah. They're both pretty similar. Cook has just got a slight lead over Kamara, but I think either of these guys really. I think if you've got either one, and I think we said this earlier in the podcast, that if you've got either one, you're probably in pretty good step to make the playoffs in your team. Fantasy quarterback of the year, Kyler Murray. Absolutely no shocks here. He's 20, 22, 25 points clear. Wouldn't shock me if he finished as the QB1 overall, which again, given his meteoric rise, I think is phenomenal. And I think it's something that he could be in that top 5 conversation for. I don't want to go like too far and say like 10 years, but I think the next 3 to 4 for sure, as long as he stays healthy and doesn't get hit out of the game, which is the only worry I have behind that Arizona line, is if he gets an injury. But he's got the escapology down at the moment. Fantasy running back of the year, we've gone again very similar to Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara, and I don't think honorable mention to James Robinson in this category as well, because he's also been phenomenal. And if you've managed to pair him with one of Cook or Kamara, then you're really laughing. Fantasy wide receiver of the year, you've gone Stephon Diggs and I've gone DK Metcalf. So thoughts on this one, Andy?
Yeah, it's hard to argue against Metcalf, especially the consistency he's shown. But I feel like Diggs was a proven wide receiver 1, borderline 1-2 in years past, and I thought it was a great opportunity for him going to be featured in Buffalo, especially paired with Josh Allen. It was a commitment to the team to show like we're going to continue to upgrade your weapons. I can't believe I got him in one league as my wide receiver 3. I think it was actually in the fishbowl, but it just shows like how the hate for Josh Allen was so real.
I know, unbelievable.
That people were just like, oh yeah, well he's gonna kill Stephon Diggs' value, and he's gone out and he's basically leading the league in receiving, and has been every bit the stud that he was brought in to be. So I think it's hard to not give him the nod for that.
No, I agree, and the reason I've gone DK Metcalf is I don't think anyone really expected the kind of volume that he's produced and that the Jets that he's got. I mean, people saw his playoff run and thought, oh, okay, let's see if he can do it over 16 games, and over 10 games, he definitely has kept up that pace. So, but I think, as we said earlier, I think there's about 10 guys you could give this award to. I think it's so close between those top 10. I don't think it you know, you can make a case for so many. One position you can't make a case for anyone else is fantasy tight end of the year. And I've been saying for years that I think the tight end position has to get to a point where it should be flexed out, because it's almost redundant. Because Travis Kelce is the tight end one by quite a long way. All right, Kittle's got injured. Mark Andrews hasn't been as effective as he normally is. Ertz, all right, he's injured, but he was a bust before that. The tight end position is just a mess. You know, Gronk was the tight end one this week. He caught 2 passes for 50 odd yards and a touchdown. He's the tight end one in half point scoring. Like, it's just at the point now where it's not even worth having tight ends. Because I mean, he's I mean, Travis Kelce is nearly 50 points ahead of Jonnu Smith.
Right, and you look at Jonnu Smith, you know, like this guy's having a pretty good season, but it's just not even close. I had Kittle in a bunch of leagues. You know, I rolled the dice between Kittle and Kelce, and it really just comes down to hold your breath and hope for no injuries.
Yeah.
And sure enough, you know, Kittle gets injured, and then it's kind of like, all right, season over, because you feel like you had that much of an advantage there. And it's not so much that, I mean, when you look at the rest of the position, that you can kind of recover from a loss like Kittle, because there's nothing really jumping out there. But when you factor in that, I mean, I guess it's the same for, you know, the Saquon Barkley, you know, owner who lost that first round pick. But it's like you said, it's such a barren wasteland of a position that flexing it out makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's got to be the way forward unless you do something creative with it. Last couple, I'm going to skip DST and kicker, because, you know, really the kicker, there shouldn't be one, because everyone's about 2 points away from each other. So fantasy waiver wire pickup of the year, we've gone same position. I've gone James Robinson, you've gone Miles Gaskin. I think, yeah, you could argue on either or. They've both been terrific this year. Fantasy bust of the year, I went with Lamar Jackson for the reason I said earlier. You've taken him in the second round. He's QB9. You've wasted your pick. You've gone with Cam Akers because, well, he hasn't done anything. So no surprise there. He definitely has been a big bust. And then fantasy surprise of the year, I picked 2 because I couldn't split them. One was James Robinson because I didn't expect him to put up the numbers. But as you said, if you knew his profile very well, you're probably not overly shocked. And the other was Ronald Jones, because I just did not think with Leonard Fournette and Shady McCoy coming in, he would even have half a sniff. And you know, he's currently sitting at running back 8, running back 9 for the season, which I would never have expected. So they're my 2. And you've gone with Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, I went with Kareem Hunt, and you know, I know Chubb missed some time or whatever, but the fact of the matter is Kareem Hunt is 6th in the league in rushing, and a lot of that came with Chubb also on the team. So for him to have emerged that dramatically, I thought was pretty surprising. And on top of it, like, this was a guy people were clamoring for to keep out of the league a mere 2 years ago, and which is why he, you know, found his way. I mean, put him back in Kansas City, and can you imagine how much better they may or may not be? Yeah, I was just surprised by the fact that Kareem Hunt is being so successful when you consider he's sharing the backfield with Nick Chubb.
I think he's better with Chubb. I think he plays better. I think when he's the sole back, I think he just doesn't seem as effective. And as you say, the numbers are backing that one up. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. This has been great fun. This has been too long since you've been on. We'll have to get you on again in the off season, Andy. But before you go, tell everyone where they can find you and get some great advice, but also just chat some ball with you, or any sport, even if it's NBA or anything with you.
Yeah, the easiest place is just to look me up on Twitter. My handle is People's Pen, People's with the Z, or you could just look for Andy Singleton. I should pop up. You know, it's been a crazy year, both from social and political landscape. So I promise I will, you know, stick to 90% sports on my timeline. But I'm happy to talk about anything, and ask away. I answer everybody, which is why I get myself in trouble because a lot of comments that are made, I respond to both good and bad. And people think I should just leave a lot of stuff alone, but the whole point of Twitter is to interact with people. So, I take advantage of that, and
I think the thing that is you just give your opinion, and some people just can't accept what your opinion is, which is a shame because you're only
right.
just offering your opinion. You're perfectly entitled to do so, which is why I've joined a couple of times when people have said things about you, and I've just said, "What do you want to do? The guy's just offering his opinion. You asked for it. Like,
Right,
you
right.
can't hate the guy for making an opinion that you have asked for. Like,
Right. Listen. I've never been. I'm sure you guys have a term for it, in England, but I've never been an ass kisser. I've just been honest, and I don't knock anybody for their opinion, but it's crazy that people are ready to demonize you for not agreeing with theirs or having your own. So, or anything that differs from theirs. So it's kind of comical, but I don't lose sleep over it. So I think the majority of people appreciate the sincerity and honesty, and it's always refreshing to hear guys like you remind me of that. So thank you for that.
no, it's true, and like I said, be a big fan of yours for a few years now, and go out there, go buy a subscription to Expand the Box Score, but go interact with Andy. He's just a knowledgeable guy who just knows a lot of sports, and gives you some good options for betting as well. But and he's just a good guy to know in the community, and yeah, just don't listen to the haters. That's all I'm going to say. But thanks for coming on as always. Really appreciate it. We'll get you on soon with stocks. But until later on in the week, we'll be back with some matchups. We'll be back with some more articles and bits and pieces. Rush Nation, stay safe, wash those hands, and don't forget, keep rushing.